In high school, I had a stalker. Here's the story. I'll try to keep it concise, but there's a lot of information for sure. I was 16 and we met on Facebook. He went to a school nearby and we decided to meet up for a movie. We had a great time together and ended up dating. First time he came to my parents' house, he had an ankle monitor on for house arrest and wouldn't tell anyone why. Red flag number 1. And since he was a minor, we couldn't find out. My parents obviously didn't allow us to hang out, so we hung out at his house or around town at the YMCA camp. I was rebellious and naive. Things started to get weird when I noticed his family was pretty odd. One day we were having sex in his bedroom, and I saw his father looking through the blinds. I screamed and called him out, and his dad ran off. Stalker guy told me that his dad was just into redheads and liked to watch us, so this wasn't the first time. I went to leave, and his mom was doing crack in the kitchen, so I decided it was time to break up. This is when it got bad. He started crying and told me that he's in cancer treatment and that's why he needs me. He doesn't have long to live, blah blah blah. I believed him and told him we could be friends. This is when the stalking started. He switched schools to my high school, but never went to class. He would just stand outside of my classroom looking inside until it was passing period. When I would leave class, he wouldn't address me. He would just follow about 10 to 15 feet behind me to my next period and stand outside the classroom again. I was too intimidated to say something to him. He was 6'4" and a heavy-set guy, so I just let it happen for weeks. It started to progress to where he would follow me home every day. He would get on the same bus as me, despite living across town, and walk 10 to 15 feet behind me all the way to my house. He would stand outside, just staring up at the window until around the time my parents got home, and then he would just leave. Finally, I told him to F off and leave me alone. I told him we could no longer be friends or acquaintances and to forget about me. However, that escalated things way further. I started getting about 150 calls a night. Half of them were him screaming death threats and in detail torture methods that he wanted to do to me. The other half were him singing me love songs that he wrote on his guitar. Every time I blocked his number, he seemed to just magically get a new one and leave more messages on that. I woke up one day to see that overnight, he had left me one of those dancing, singing snowmen on my porch. He had stabbed it in the head and the knife was still sticking out. He covered it in his liquid deodorant that I had previously mentioned liking the smell of. And I noticed there was a hole where the little song recorder device was. When I pressed the hand, it was not the regular Frosty the Snowman song that played. It was his voice, singing eerily, "I'm going to have you forever, I'm never going to let you be." I was done at this point and told my parents, who contacted the school. They suspended him, but he still waited at my bus stop every day and walked to my home with me. One day, he ran at me, like he was going to tackle me. When I tensed up for the impact, he stopped and hugged me. It wasn't a regular hug. It was like he was trying to crush me. I was 5'1" and about 90 pounds at the time, and he ended up cracking one of my ribs. I cried and he started crying too before running off. He left me a voicemail later apologizing in song. This one night is the night I'll never forget. And it's the reason we got a restraining order and my dad got a gun. I woke up one evening for no reason, just fully awake. I got up to go to my kitchen to get a glass of water to relax, and in the reflection on my fridge, I saw movement in my backyard. I couldn't see well because it was so dark outside and so light inside, so I went to the back sliding glass door to get a better look. When I got closer, I was met with the silhouette of a 6'4" man standing just outside the door. Stalker guy was in my backyard under my room at 3 a.m. He was just staring at me. I yelled and my parents got up, but he was gone by the time my dad went outside. There's a patio right outside my bedroom window that goes all the way to the ground, so it's possible he could have been on top of the patio looking directly into my bedroom window before. We got a restraining order granted shortly after that, and Stalker guy dropped out of school. I haven't seen him since in person, but every 6 months or so he makes a new Facebook and tries to friend request me. I just block it and report it every time. Scary stuff. Y'all ever heard that myth that if you wake up in the middle of the night for no reason, there's likely someone looking at you? Well, maybe it's true. I don't know what he's doing now or where he went, but I don't care to know. Let's not meet ever again. I have several Let's Not Meet stories rolling around in my head. I think today I'm ready to tell the story of my stalker. To preface this, I know there are a lot worse stalker stories out there, and mine might be pretty mild, but it still terrified me and haunts me today, nearly 10 years later. It was my first real full-time job after college. I went to school for art, but the job was basically an admin, along with a bunch of random responsibilities. At least once a week, I worked in the warehouse, counting and organizing inventory. A coworker of mine started hanging around and seemed like he wanted to be friends. He was very helpful with the job, having been there for a while and knowing the ins and outs of the company. His name was Tim. He was 46, lived in his mom's basement, had never been married. He had a cat he talked about often, and claimed he used to be a Hell's Angel. He drove 18-wheelers and thought they were super cool. He started offering to smoke me out on lunch breaks, which I would accept because, duh. Then he started buying me lunch, stating, "My friend did this for me when I was your age. I'm just paying it forward. One day you can help someone else when you have the money to spend on them." He knew all the local places to eat, and would choose a place, suggesting what I should try. It was a mistake to ever accept anything from him, but I'm a foodie and he introduced me to things like Cuban espresso and burger buffets, adding excitement to my otherwise monotonous workday. Around that time, our friend's cat had several kittens. One of them was a beautiful Tory named Penny that I knew Tim would love, so I fostered her for a bit until he decided he wanted her and he came over to pick her up. She got along with his other cat and was super sweet. He loved her and would send me pictures of her and them together all the time. We had him over, my boyfriend and I, a few times over a period of about a year. He told the same stories over and over again, but we tolerated him because we thought he was lonely. I made him a dating profile because he often spoke about how he wanted to meet the one, but he rejected every single woman he matched with. He would pick their appearance apart on beautiful women who were in his age group, even some much younger. Now, when I say Tim is an unattractive man, please trust me. He was gross, overweight, sweaty, had thick, coarse black hair, and a huge gap in his incisors that he would suck spit through after he laughed, licking his teeth. He had giant pores and moles, and he was just old. We did have many enjoyable conversations, but I started to get the creepy vibes. For my birthday that year, he bought me a first edition of my favorite book, after I told him the story about how I lost my mass-produced copy. I had exchanged favorite books with a friend who ended up losing my favorite book. Her book was Twilight, which I hated. He also bought me a necklace that was for cancer survivors, which was very sweet, but also kind of really personal and awkward, but still seemed innocent enough. He would show up with a case of beer, knocking on the door unexpectedly. We tried to be hospitable, but it started getting annoying. However, I felt bad for him, and he was always so overly nice and helpful at work. I felt bad turning him away. One day after we had lunch, while sitting in his truck in our work parking lot, he told me he thought I was the one. I reminded him about my boyfriend, and he said, "No, he's not right for you. You're supposed to be with me." "No, Tim, you know I care about you as a friend, but I'm not interested in anything with you like that. You're making me very uncomfortable. I love you, I can take care of you. Think of all I can do for you. I have X amount of money in savings. Please stop, this is getting weird." I don't like you like that at all. Please, drop it." I got out of the truck and shut the door. The storm was brewing. After he confessed his love for me, I told my husband, then boyfriend, everything. He had warned me, and he reminded me how he had called it. He always knew that this would happen, that Tim's creepy, that I shouldn't have accepted all the food and gifts, etc. He was totally right, and I felt sick. I started putting distance between Tim and I, while still being kind and sociable at work. I told my husband everything. Tim would call me over and over again, even though I always ignored his call, until one night we got sick of it, and I answered the phone and told him to stop calling me. He was crying and begging me to talk to him. My boyfriend took the phone and told him to fuck off and hung up. That's when the threats started. He would leave voicemails about how he couldn't stand to look at Penny and how he's going to take her into the woods and kill her, or he could just let her free. She would be eaten by wild animals since she was still so small. He said she reminded him of me and that he hated her as much as he hated me, that he wanted to bash her brains in. I started to call into work sick. I didn't want to see him. He ignored me deliberately, which I appreciated. He wouldn't look at me but acted normal beside his sudden coldness towards me. Seeing him was awful. I ended up getting laid off. Tim had other coworkers try to contact me on his behalf. People reaching out telling me I needed to call him, that he's hurt by my sudden leaving. I would get calls from random phone numbers in my area and it would be Tim. I would hang up as soon as I heard him say hello. I changed my number. We moved across the country. It was maybe a year later, he somehow found my new number and called again, leaving this huge voicemail. He said he had found the one, but also he was dying. I can't remember how or why he was dying. It's all hazy now, but he needed this innovative technology or surgery that happened to only be available in my town, in my state 1,000 miles away from where he lived and we worked together a year before, and he wanted to meet up. It was all such a coincidence, and he was so excited to catch up and introduce me to his pregnant fiancée. He also needed my address. At this time, I was pregnant with my first and only child. Tim said his fiancée was pregnant too, that we would be parents at the same time. At that moment, I blocked every single person I had ever known from that town on Facebook, every single person that knew Tim that he could have gotten information from. I changed my phone number again. The nightmare started of him showing up in the middle of the night, having somehow found us, of him carrying a case of beer, banging on the door, sucking spit through his teeth. I felt like he wanted to find me so he could get back at me somehow. Looking back, he was a total incel. I don't know if any of his story was true or what his plans were. Anyways, F this dude. The college I attended was in a very tiny town in eastern Washington. So eastern, in fact, it was only about 10 minutes from the Idaho border, but that's not really important here. There was not much to do in Pullman other than drink and go to parties. I had never really been much of a party goer myself, so I was one of the few not spending every single weekend getting hammered. One of those weekends I had spent pretty much the whole day in my dorm room and was antsy for some social interaction. I hadn't done much that day other than study, and I wanted to at least get out of my dorm. I texted my best friend at the time, and we decided we would go to the football stadium to look at the stars. The football stadium, at the time, remained open 24/7, and when we left, it was around 12 a.m., so the stadium lights had been shut off, and we had a beautiful view of the stars. We walked to the stadium in great spirits and had a wonderful night talking and laughing. On the way back, everything changed. By the time we were leaving back to the dorm rooms, it was a little after 2 in the morning. We were walking down the main road when we saw a Jeep approaching. Nothing too unusual, however, the lights were off. So my best friend, not knowing how to SSDGM, stay sexy and don't get murdered, used her hands to make a flashing signal at them, telling them their lights were off. As soon as she did this, they got out only a short distance past us, We heard them slam on their brakes and turn around, driving up the wrong lane of traffic to come back. We were right by a sky bridge at the time this happened. We ducked behind the stairs, but the Jeep was driving back and forth looking for us. We ended up having to play a sick game of duck and hide on the stairs until the Jeep finally parked. When they did, we had gotten to the top of the stairs and laid ourselves flat on the sky bridge, hiding in the shadows. We had a clear view of them, and as soon as we were flat on the ground, we see 5 men get out of the Jeep. Not just that, but they each had a baseball bat. These men were checking the bushes and surrounding areas, again looking for us. I called the police and quietly explained the situation. After about 10 minutes of the men searching and whistling and swinging their bats around, they finally left. Not long after that, the police showed up, but there wasn't much they could do but offer us a ride home in their cruiser. I have no idea what those men's intentions were, but I'm so glad I never found out. So to the creepy 5 men on Stadium Way, let's not meet. Obligatory, this happened a few years ago when I was a child. My family and I are dirt poor, and not only that, I have horrible social anxiety, especially at the time of this incident. So, because we were so poor, my mother couldn't afford a babysitter, and we had moved away from our family after an abusive past. We lived in the middle of nowhere in Pennsylvania, so Mom never really worried about crimes or possible criminals. Because of this, she would leave me in the car as she and my siblings went shopping. I had social anxiety, as I said before, so I was fine with it and preferred staying in the car. I had a phone and doors were locked, yada yada. No need to be worried, we would think. Of course, that was wrong in this instance. I was chilling in the front seat, playing some music on my phone and all that. I never really paid too much attention to cars driving by. Mostly paid attention to the people that walked just a bit too close and would make me nervous. That was until this old dark red purplish beaten to hell car pulled in front of me. I spared a glance on instinct. There were 2 people in the car, a skinny yet tall man with a stained white shirt, and a bigger yet again tall woman. Nothing really out of the ordinary, so no red flags were raised. I just expected them to go on throughout their day and all. I stopped paying attention and went back to my phone. A few minutes later, I had gotten bored from scrolling through social media. I set down my phone and looked up, thinking I was just going to be staring off into space or something. Nope. What I saw had my heart racing immediately. The 2 people in the car had in fact not gone about their day. There they were, sitting just as they had been, except for one thing. They were staring and smiling at me. Not that type of, oh hey, you saw me, so now I have to give a polite smile. No, it was a smile that showed off their yellow, rotting teeth and sent chills down my spine. I immediately freaked out, my anxiety spiking, and I wondered what the hell they were doing. I averted my eyes from them, hoping they hadn't seen me staring or the panic on my expression, except they must have. Suddenly, the beaten car started. After sitting there doing nothing for what must have been 5 minutes, they started the car. My anxiety went out of control when I spared another glance upwards. The skinny man in the driver's side was reaching below him, and when he came back up, he had a freaking pocket knife, and not one of those small, easily portable ones. It was huge. The knife was already protruding out. I panicked and my flight or fight response kicked in. I didn't even think. I gripped my phone and bolted. I left the car on, keys behind and everything. I just left. The thing was, the minute I was beginning to make a run for it, their door opened. It made a long and ear-splitting screech, which was how I knew someone was getting out of that car the minute I started getting out of mine. I didn't spare a glance. I just ran. Ran and ran until I made it to my mom in the supermarket and told her what had happened. She freaked out, and because I had left the keys in the car, decided to go outside to get them. My siblings and I followed behind her, but when we got to the car, the people were gone. No car, nothing. And nothing was stolen either. I had left the car unlocked and running, and nothing seemed to be touched. It would have been a perfect opportunity to steal or rummage through the car. I still don't know what was really going to happen. The parking lot wasn't packed, but it sure as hell wasn't empty either. How were they planning on using that knife? Someone was bound to notice. Still, had me paranoid for the next few shopping trips, and I always went in with my family after that.